something really different to grow your business or grow your career and add value in a way that's different to what anyone else is doing. So I'd love to welcome our two panellists up to the stage. If you come up. First of all, we have Anne Fulton from Fuel 50. And Aaron, if you could take a seat as well. So we selected Aaron and Anne because we all believe that they've actually done something quite unusual, and they have managed to really stand out and break the mold in this VUCA world. So we're going to have a panel discussion about how they've done this, and they're going to share with you their story, their journey, how they got here tonight, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions, because I'm sure that you'll be stimulated by what they have to say. So first of all, let me introduce you. Anne is the founder of Fuel 50, which is an HR software platform, and that provides innovative career pathing solutions in 33 countries and in 28 languages, which is astonishing. And they have also raised $4.6 million US, and they're sold in over 75 of the top Fortune 500 companies. So really, she's making a global impact already. She got her first degree from the University of Auckland in psychology, and then went to Waikato and did a postgrad in counselling. Aaron attained a Bachelor of Arts in Marine Science and Botany from the University of Hawaii, and then was called over the ocean to the University of Auckland to do his Masters in Anthropology. He has over 15 years of international consulting experience in advertising and research design, and currently he's the Vice President of Strategy and Analytics at Ignited, which is a marketing and insights consultancy in Los Angeles. So he's done a lot of work in leading consumer thinking in large corporates and helping them transform so that they stay ahead of themselves. He's done work for GE, for Lego, and also for Disney. So here we have a wealth of experience in front of us about how they can track where the consumers are going and where careers are going. So Anne, would you like to start off and tell us what your journey is?
Awesome. So firstly, it's awesome to be here, and I'm really loving hearing all the Kiwi accents. I usually start off that I'm going to put up subtitles as I speak so people can follow along. And I'm also really enjoying, are they punters out in the garden? What do you reckon? I reckon.
Yeah, I think so.
I know, pretty cool. So Fuel 50, I mean, we are part of New Zealand's tech innovation and super proud of that. So we are career pathing software. We've been called Match.com meets LinkedIn, right? So you can find your future career match and then make connections with people within business. We've also been called Tinder for talent, right? Swipe left, swipe right, and find your future. So that career pathing software is being used in organizations. So we're almost the antidote to LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is trying to steal away people. Our software, Fuel 50, is helping people see a future in those organizations with a career path. So, I mean, as you said, we're in 28 languages and 33 countries, probably more today. But, we're working with some of the world's largest brands like Walmart with, their 2.4 million employees, and Citigroup and eBay and MasterCard, and transforming that career experience. But I guess what I'm most proud of is that we've got our production and engineering is out of New Zealand. So we've got a team of 15 in New Zealand. We started, 3 or 4 years ago, and now have 15 people. And New Zealand is so efficient in terms of, development. And it's a really efficient place to build your technology. So that's amazing. And now we've got another team of 15 here in the US and across the globe. So on a growth story, that's amazing. And obviously LA is the best place to be running your business from.
Great, thank you, Anne. And Aaron, how about your story?
Hello, and thank you again for having me today. So my story is interesting. As you can tell, I'm not a Kiwi, but I think I am one at heart. So my story is a bit interesting. I grew up in upstate New York in Buffalo, and if any of you have been to Niagara Falls, from Buffalo you can see Canada, and it's so close but yet so far away. And from a young age I was fascinated by how do you get from here to there? Obviously there's bridges, but what did people do before that? So I began really young asking questions like, how do we get from A to B? How do we move and understand society's shift from different places? So that curiosity continued to take me through as I studied my undergrad. And while at the University of Hawaii, I realized that part of the Polynesian Triangle is New Zealand, right? And so unique while doing some work with the Hukalea, I was able to understand that movements through Polynesia, you had to understand water, stars, light. But it was more than that. It was the culture and the material culture that moved you from A to B. So I had the opportunity as part of my last semester to actually go to New Zealand to do a semester abroad, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with understanding how anthropology and the material culture program as part of the anthropology degree actually helped to assemble those things. And I use the word assemble very particularly because I actually built a series of paddles I built out of New Zealand greywacke and adze. It took me 268 hours to make this. Like today you may think, well, we just prototype it. We just use a CNC machine or 3D printing. But I wanted to do it by hand. I wanted to have the blood, sweat, and tears, so I understood how it was made. I understood how a waka was able to get from here to there. And I think that that's why I've been able to translate it into my career, is that what we think we're going to do and what we actually do are vastly different. So today I'm going to talk about what we perceive to be the reality is in fact an artificial reality, and we create a new reality.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So what I'd love to do is have you both give your view on this term disruption and whether you think that it's still relevant or it is just business as usual, and that's something we have to really pace up and deal with. What do you think, Anne?
I'm going on the counter argument, and I'm going with disruption is here, right? So 6% of the jobs in the US are going to be gone in 5 years. And so if you actually extrapolate that in terms of how many jobs that's actually affected, it's hundreds of thousands. So that's hundreds of thousands of people's lives who are affected. So, we're in the lens of, all those people had a future, they had careers, and that they are really concerned now about their future. So, our lens on that is you're either the disruptor or you're disrupted, and so wouldn't you rather be in the driving seat? And I think Aaron and I are both, we decided we were both navigators, so he's on his waka, and we've been doing career navigation, but helping people see a future. But it's also helping people, the organizations that I'm talking to are so fearful of having talent to fill their future talent needs. It's a real concern to them. As having that talent and capability to cross the talent chasm as they're seeing it now. And I think Uber are a great example of a disruptor, right? They've disrupted, what was a regulated taxi industry. And now we're working with Uber to kind of create a new disrupted transaction model between employees and managers, which is, or the organisation. So people can sell their time and effort and their energy into that organisation's marketplace. And there's some things that you get in return. So there's new transaction models coming. So that's our view.
More of it. Thanks, Anne. And how about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I think there's always is and was buzzwords. And I think back to 1953 when Sid Barnes, the creator of the Creative Problem Solving Institute, first started to look at CPSI and the creative problem solving. So terms since the 1950s to today have always been in vogue. The challenge is, as many of you know, is either you're in the early adopter and you're using it to the point of nauseam, and therefore you retire it quicker, and then the mainstream begins to pick it up, and at that point, you think it is no longer in vogue. So disruption, I agree with Anne. It's one of these things, it's here. We just have to learn how we pivot to it, right? And it's no longer just a capital D disruption, but a little d, right? And then it's the little movements that, how do you pivot between a decision you make for your person, for your community, and then for larger within society. So I think that there continues to be innovations to the word disruption that we're going to continue to see new forms of it.
Okay.
So can I add to that?
Yeah.
Which is, I think that, so therefore we need agility in our workforce and agility in our people. And I think that's one of the things that comes really beautifully from New Zealanders, right? We were sent out into the backyard to go and entertain ourselves. So we are naturally, agile. It would never happen today, but, as a kid, I used to be sent off, into the bush for hours with my, 4 siblings and the neighbourhood kids, and be told to come back at 6 p.m. in time for dinner. That kind of freedom, but that creates an agility in people. So I think New Zealanders are really sought after in terms of responding to a disrupted world.
Okay, so you've talked about a couple of common themes, such as around pivoting and agility. And when I think about your careers and the fact you're both here now and you've come from quite different backgrounds and you've had different junctions along the way, can you describe to us that moment when you decided to take a big pivot? What was that aha moment that you came up with?
So yeah, I'm sorry, my aha moment goes right back to age 14 when I took a careers test, and it said I should be a funeral director or a vocational guidance counsellor. And that started my brain thinking, oh my God, what's the commonalities between that and why has that been suggested to me? So that started me on a lifelong mission to actually solve that problem, which is, to build a predictive career test. And it's the why I went to Auckland University in the first instance, was to solve that problem. And then I did become a vocational guidance counsellor and did my postgrad in guidance and counselling. But, with technology innovation today, we now have AI and science and technologies caught up. So, we can actually deliver on that promise of a predictive career test that takes, you and your individual talents and desires and aspirations and values, and then match that to those organisational pathways. So yeah, that was the start of my aha, and here I am, God only knows how many years later.
And how about you, Aaron?
I'd have to say my aha was when I moved from New Zealand to Singapore to work for an innovation consultancy. And I realized when they brought me on to do ethnography that what I learned and actually what I was doing was vastly different. And my aha was that I needed to learn very quickly how to take in new skills in new environments. So a quick backstory on the context, I was asked by Levi's to go and to reimagine the future of denim in Asia. So Lee was the dominant denim brand, Levi's sales were declining, and they said, we have to go out and reimagine the future of denim. So I went out to 26 countries, different language, different cultures, and had to understand what did denim mean. And in that, I really discovered the aha is you have to listen twice as hard as you speak. You have to be an active listener to be able to know the subtleties. And one of the big ahas was that in Korea, women would cut the tops of their leaves so they could move their hips, right? And so what it allowed them to do was to be able, by moving easier, they could do more intricate moves and win competitions. So therefore, their choice of denim allowed them to win more competitions. So this perceived belief that what you wear allows you to reinterpret who you are. And so when I told this back to the team at Levi's, they didn't believe it. So we went back to the first 4 countries, and we saw that it wasn't just in Korea. It was a universal trend amongst techno dancers to be able to alter their denim. So what we created was a whole program, kind of like when you go through the airports and they scanned you. So using amplipometrics, which is a body mass indexing, where you could create your own customized pair of jeans. To the consumer, that's great because you could buy your own pair of jeans. But the data associated to that is that Levi's was able to learn what works in each country and be able to tailor a mass-appropriate jean that meant something to everyone in those countries. So to me, the aha was to be able to know how and when to be an active listener.
Okay, thank you. So now we've got a sense of who we've got up on the stage. Who's got some questions that they'd like to ask? Okay, well, lucky I've got lots more. All right, Stuart.
If you look back to your time at Auckland University and where you are now, what could we have done better in your university experience, not just in the classroom, but in experience generally, to have prepared you for where you are now in your careers, but also in your lives? I'm asking the question because it's relevant to how we think about the programs the things we offer today's students, preparing them for a future that we know is uncertain.
I think that's quite a hard question to answer because I really value the education that I was given. But in hindsight, you should have forced me to join Wendy's School of Innovation straight away, and the entrepreneurialism, maybe do an MBA afterwards, or made that so easy to do an MBA as part of that. So that might have been helpful. But I'm a big fan of, and I know we're going there later, but let's just go there now, of STEM, because I think now it's the combination, I've done the soft sciences, it's still a science, psychology, but I need engineers and IT people, and that combination between psychology and engineering is incredibly powerful, and I'd be hiring people as fast as I could that could do both of those things, and mathematicians. So, it's possibly, maybe I'm coming back to putting my own case forward, is giving people kind of a career navigation system so that they can see how they might want to apply their capabilities and then think harder about what subjects might help them be marketable out there in the workplace.
So for you, then university should be much more around applied learning so that they can get somewhere at the end of their degree?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of applied learning and internships and putting people out in the real world and bringing them back into them problem solve, so just like my parents sent me out into the bush to play, and bring you back into school, I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, I would be totally behind any kind of internship programs that you, and I look at, am I allowed to say this? I look at Auckland, AUT, and they've got a really well developed, applied kind of business program, and I've taken lots of their grads previously, so those kind of programs are
Great.
amazing.
Thank you. And what about you, Aaron?
Yeah.
What could Auckland Uni have done better?
I agree. I think one of the things, so I did my master's there, that unlike in the US where you take a broad range of classes as your undergraduate and part of your master's, in New Zealand, you're very focused in what you take, and it has its benefits to allow you to become an expert quicker. But what it also leaves a blind spot to is how do you diversify both your peer base, but also your knowledge base. So one of the things that I think would be helpful is to be able to create interdisciplinary groups where students from the arts would work with innovation in business and law. So not only do you learn skill sets, but you build up your network. So after you graduate, you have a more well-rounded audience base. And this was something that I believed so much at the time. When I was living in Toronto, I was teaching at the Ontario College of Art and Design, which had a partnership with at University of Toronto. And Roger Martin had a business program that we worked with OCAD. And in that, we had art students work with business students, and we actually worked with industry partners such as Nike and Herman Miller to co-create an accelerator program. And we had to go out and pitch products, services, where my team, I taught them anthropology, ethnography skills, working with product designers to create industrial products, then with the business students that they'd actually have to create business plans to create new companies. I would love to be able to see the University of Auckland create something similar where there's an innovation accelerator incubator program where it's not just an internship, but it's part of your form of study. So afterwards, you actually have a business, you have a company, because I agree that New Zealand, aside from 1 and 2 cows and people and tourists, that human capital, right, and our ability to innovate is what will succeed, and that stems from being able to bring people into university and to be able to attract both students into programs, but to convince their parents that this is the university that is accelerating the way that my kid is going to be successful.
That's a great answer, and so aligned with what we do at the centre. And
I promise I did not know that.
No, and in fact, something we've just launched, which I didn't mention, I'll come to you in a second, sir. And my opening comments is we've just opened up a brand new innovation and entrepreneurship hub with a makerspace with 3D printers, CNC routers, and lots of tools for rapid prototyping to occur. And what we find that happens in this space is people become accidental entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. They come in, they make, they get confidence, they have courage to take risks and explore where this might go. And we find that the beauty of the ideas comes from that conflict of a cross-functional team. Yep. So there's lots of new things happening in that space.
And if I may, Winnie and I were talking earlier about Lego, right? And you guys just have some of the Lego Serious Play, right? And if those of you who have used Lego or Lego Serious Play, it allows for kinesthetic learning, so hands-on, minds-on learning. So when you're doing stuff with your hands, your brain is thinking between the two hemispheres, and that's when that accidental, like aha and epiphanies tend to happen. If you can cultivate that within people, and even in your own thinking, you get greater success more rapidly.
Great, thank you. What was your question?
My question is, compared to how you went to school and went into business and found your aha moments and how you found your motivations, are you seeing the next generation, the latest generation of people that are going through university and then coming out and going to business? Are there different motivations, management skills, things you have to do for that generation as opposed to when you went through?
Well, one thing that blows me away about this generation is the way they problem solve, and that they will, if they've got a challenge to kind of solve, that they will figure it out and they'll Google it and they'll be onto all sorts of things until they've solved a problem. So, I find that they're really agile and active learners, which is super helpful. And kind of coming back to Stuart's point of view is that we we developed our own internship program for students in Masters of Psychology and did over 2 years, had them come in regularly and give them that business exposure and keep testing them. But, you know, it was an amazing kind of opportunity for us to kind of cultivate people and their talent, you know, build out our kind of business reputation, but also, you know, spot amazing talent for the business. So, you know, that was really helpful in terms of the talent pipe.
Can I just answer that real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah.
If you don't mind? Thank you. I agree that there's been a significant shift. YouTube was one of my clients, and one of the things that they've seen as a challenge is that people today want to become YouTube stars. They don't want to go to university, they want to be an influencer. They actually want to contribute to that as opposed to go to university and actually become an influencer within a company. And that's been problematic as an employer because they think that they know everything, right? And they don't take criticism very well. So you find creative ways, and I see a lot of nodding, creative ways to actually address how you give them feedback. Right? And you know, that's one of the things that I struggle with, particularly in terms of insights and strategy, is it takes time to percolate on these things, and you can't just come to a conclusion so quickly, which a lot of initial graduates want to do. Right? So that has been a challenge where you have to kind of feed them along and allow them the time to breathe on that.
Can I just also add a however? However, there's a discipline, you know, that you expect from somebody that's come out with a university degree, right? You know, there's some disciplines and some protocols and some standards that, you know, is invaluable, and so that's why we hire them.
Great, thanks for that plug there, Anne. We need that. You've got a question.
I was just going to say, like, as far as getting people from different disciplines and putting them together, I think is extremely valuable. I did a Bachelor of Jazz Performance when I was at Auckland University, and I don't really do much now to do with being a jazz musician, but had I been connected back then with, say, some entrepreneurial thing, like I was always out kind of making things happen in that sort of way, that to have a path to meet people doing something cool with engineering and that kind of thinking, it's like every person is good at, there are just people that are entrepreneurial minded that you can find in all those different courses that they just got out of high school and it was music that they fell into, but actually they should be, they don't even know what economics is, you know?
Right.
But no, I'm really interested in that stuff. So
Yeah, there's something really valuable in what you've said, and what we see at the centre is that all of our programs are experiential, so the participants really learn by doing, and we put them in situations where if they've got a business idea, they make a prototype or they make a poster of it, and they have to go down Queen Street or go to a farmer's market and ask real people what they think of it. And you can imagine if you're 19 and talking to a complete stranger about your idea, that's terrifying. But through that process, they grow their courage, they grow confidence, and they start to understand that there's so much more that they're able to do. And that's when they start to mix it up and learn how to solve problems creatively and deal with ambiguity, which of course are good skills for the future of work. Who else has got a question? Down the back.
First of all, I asked my question. I went to a Spark, and my great feeling, and I was head of the startup weekend in New Zealand, and one of my big criticisms going through Spark is that it was all about business planning and not actually getting out and talking to people. So, great, just want to acknowledge that shift because it's so important. There's so many beliefs that we rely on as entrepreneurs that are often based falsely, and I appreciate that you guys are pushing people to get out of their comfort zone and challenge that. So, firstly, very
Great, thank you.
my question is about what you two are seeing in relation to the greatest challenges of our time, our social challenges, climate change and poverty and health challenges and so on. How's that coming through in terms of shifts in values with people entering the workforce and talent, and how organizations are adopting that very different value set and essentially profit maximization, and also how our companies are responding to that and having to adopt that into them and being agile and, as you say, pivoting, because they can't just change their business models overnight. How are you guys seeing that shift? Is that happening, and how they're responding?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is something that, you know, the biggest of companies to the most scrappy, you know, individual startups are looking at. You know, as many of you guys, if either in LA or around LA, you see that the homeless problem that's here, right? It's one of the largest in the country, if not the world. And it's something that so many organizations are trying to find ways, from tiny homes to workplace programs to confidence building initiatives, to try to rehabilitate people. And it is a complex problem that is equally not solved overnight. But I think that what it comes down to is there is a sense of empathy that I think we're seeing coming back into what we do. There was an HBR article called Empathic Design about 12 years ago, and it talked about that there will be the preface of a shift back to empathy in what we do and how we give back, where we can't just think business-minded profit bottom line, we have to know the soft side of people. And I think we're starting to see where those two worlds are coming together, where you see the need for business planning as well as social corporate responsibility coming into play, where it's not just a single bottom line, but a triple bottom line, where it's good for me, it's good for you, it's good for all. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly in LA and in California, are leading down to that, where they'll spend a portion of their time or the portion of their proceeds to want to make sure that they're helping or giving back. You know, there's a lot of work in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, that is really trying to say what we do here isn't just a model for a particular geography, but something that's replicatable across the country. So I think we're really beginning to see that shift happen.
How about you, Anne?
Well, firstly, I love that line, the AAA. You know, I think that, good for me, good for the business, and, good for society. So, big tick for that. And I agree that we're seeing that as being a key trend. So, even the largest and the smallest, the top 5 drivers today in terms of a successful organisation is, that purpose, alignment and social responsibility. So it's being built into the DNA of companies. And one of the favourite companies that I'm working with is Patagonia, and, right behind them. And we talk about their values and the employees' values. And one of the things that they really push is social activism, is one of their values. And so we have specific cards for them around, their values alignment. But of course, Patagonia is taking on Trump right now, and, and I'm like right behind them. So, I think they're a good example of organisations doing good stuff and hearing that more and more. And I think they're taking it really seriously. They seem to think it's driven from millennials, and I don't believe it's only from there. But yeah, it's definitely happening more frequently.
And certainly what we find at the centre is about 30 to 40% of ideas, particularly coming from undergrads, have a social spin on them. And so they're very much after that triple bottom line. And if we think about that age group, they've been brought up at school worrying about the environment and other social issues. And so they just expect that to be covered off, I think, when they go and get a job as well.
I think there's also a fear that our world's going to be vastly different. Right? If we don't, at each of our generations, do something about it. And I think technology has given us the vehicle to connect to more people geographically, but also from a value-based perspective. And I think that we're starting to see the outcome of that, in the use of social media and white papers and companies that want to make sure that some of these issues, climate, oceans, and whatnot, are being addressed.
Any other questions? Okay, so a question I've got for you is, given the work that you both do, you peer into the minds of employees, in your case, and in your case, Aaron, you peer into the minds of consumers and what is on the agenda for businesses to be worried about. So if you could think about those sets that you're looking into, where do you think the main trends are going to be in 5 years' time?
Yeah. I think part of that is that we don't know, right? The rate of change is happening so quickly today that it's so hard to predict what's happening 6 months down the road, let alone 5 years. But I think what we can start to see is some of these trends, have a life cycle to them, right? As if it was an organism, right? It has to percolate into people, into society, and actually take on an identity. The question is as thinkers, like how and when do we intercept into that? So if we talk about being a disruptor, is it appropriate that we always disrupt at the beginning? Is it right that an early adopter is actually going to have the biggest form of impact, or using a long tail model where we're giving little bits here and there will actually have a cumulative impact? So in part, it's being able to understand and unpack that these are wicked problems that we face today. And something that I talk a lot about is this A to D approach, where you look at anthropology, business, design, and the consumer together. And it's when you apply that lens that you can actually begin to deconstruct things and dial it up and down. Like a DJ moves his tables, those 4 things can go up and down depending on what the needs are.
So yeah, I'm starting with your opening line, which is I don't know. But you know, I mean, I love looking at visionaries like Elon Musk and thinking about what on earth is he going to think about next. You know, like putting people on Mars and colonizing Mars and building tunnels under LA. You know, it's just like I did scratch my head when he first came up with it. It's like, what's he doing that for? You know, so trying to join the dots between what people are thinking about, you know, that are the true visionaries in our space. But I mean, I guess, you know, in my own area, which is, you know, the world of work and, you know, the employees, from an employee lens, is the disruption and the Uberization of the workforce. And we're even starting to think about, you know, that we may be entering a true or a new talent marketplace, you know, in the future, which is that every job is crowdsourced. You know, like at the moment we crowdsource our Uber drivers, right? And that didn't used to happen, but everything can go into a true talent marketplace so that you can sell parts of your skills and talents to one organisation and another organisation over here, and that there's a true kind of community of talent across organisations, cross-culturally, across the globe. So those are the kind of things that we're anticipating.
So given that Uberization of talent, what do you think universities need to do to prepare their graduates for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it was you know, that focus on cross-discipline. The more we can cultivate that, the more value there's going to be, right? You know, you've got your foundational degree, but you know, if you can have cross-disciplinary learning, I think that's going to help us for sure.
Great, thank you.
I would even go as far as to say making it, you know, mandatory for people to do multiple degrees. Like, how bad would that be for people if they could do the same level of program within the same period of time? So if they could do a 3-year degree program and having two, I don't know if it's possible, but the importance is by being able to stretch the way you think, like a rubber band. If you can push and pull the different things, like for example, you took jazz, right? I'm sure now you still think rhythm, and you think beats, right? Sympathetic rhythm, and the things that you do in whatever you're doing today. So it's been fundamental to the way that you think as a person. We just don't always go back to see how can we actually teach that, right? And there are programs, and if we unpack, it's not at university we need kids to start thinking about it. It's important. We need to get them thinking earlier on, so when they're at university, they already feel like, I want to do a program that is interdisciplinary, that is multidisciplinary, and I want to have leadership from these different places that are going to impact the way that I can think, both from a business perspective, but also from a consumer. So the hybridization of, say, business and anthropology or psychology actually helps in being able to get people to think differently.
Okay, two more questions.
I know there's been a lot of conversation in the States, especially about the role of universities and free speech. And I wonder if you have thoughts about what role universities play in fostering critical thinking and free speech, and whether that's shifting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I often have both teaching here in the US and overseas is that students in the US are free to speak their mind, and they do it not always thinking the impact of what they say. Right? I also teach in Denmark, and the students there, they're very quiet, and then at the very end, they'll raise their hand and they'll speak. And so they process differently. So in the US, they're very quick to speak as opposed to in Europe. And I'll liken it, there's a Chinese metaphor of the monkey king Wu, where there's the proverb goes is he has an egg in his mouth, and every time you ask him a question, he takes the egg out before he speaks, right? So it's this notion of wanting to contemplate how you speak and when you speak. So universities, in the US, it's more comfortable to be able to do that, where if I find difficulty as an employer is that sometimes my employees don't listen all the way through, they already jump to a conclusion. So they miss some of the instruction or the problems because they already think they have the solution.
You know, I was doing venture capital for a while, and one of the big themes is artificial intelligence and robotics, and you see that coming through, and you see it in everything. Yep. How is that changing the landscape for jobs and how people think about companies even? What they do in companies, what type of talent they're looking for?
I guess my answer is that there's a huge fear around what AI is going to do to my job, you know, and yet there's not a discipline that doesn't have to respond. So the legal profession are having to respond, and medical profession are going to have to respond in terms of how they're using AI differently. So yeah, it's I think it's how we respond to that challenge.
I foresee it being a core curriculum, right? It'll be a new pedagogy that everyone will have to learn how to incorporate it into their disciplines. Right? And businesses will have to figure out, no matter who you are and what you do, how does it assist or detract your business that you have to come up with a new solve around it, right? With Google announcing their new Google Assistant, that would change the way that I use Google, but it's also going to change the way that, from an employment perspective, that you have an assistant, because there may be a time that you won't need your physical assistant because you have a virtual assistant.
So we've talked a lot about change and disruption, which for you is still real and the new normal. So what is one piece of advice you'd give our audience about how to really thrive in this world?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, prepare for it and be agile. And we talk about career agility as being a little bit like a snowboarder. So we were trying to think of what's an analogy? And, like somebody doing a stretch after, a yoga pose or a stretch after running, that was too static. So we talked about the snowboarder as being representing the agility. So you've got to check the snow conditions before you go out there, right? You've got to check the weather, avalanche warnings, and you've got to see what your mates are doing, what everyone else around you is, and then you're ready to get on the mountain. Once you're on the mountain, you've got to respond to, exactly the terrain that's right in front of you, so you've got to keep responding, turn fast, shift, shift your weight and respond to what's happening. So that's kind of the way that we look at it, is staying truly agile in the moment, but, looking back at the big picture.
It's a very vivid metaphor. I think that's going to stick with all of us, Anne. Thank you. How about you, Aaron? What's the one piece of advice you'd give to thrive?
I think, again, agility is important, but I also think it's about, how do you differentiate, right? How do you differentiate what you do against what someone else could do or against what another business or industry could do? So laddering on the metaphor I used of the DJ, right? There's always things that are at play, that some that you can control and some that you can't. But if you think of, again, a DJ is always wearing the headset, so they have a pulse what's on business, a pulse what's on culture, and they're pivoting to whatever they need to. So I think that complementary in terms of our metaphors, but we are in a state of flux. The more comfortable you are with flux, the better you're going to be, yet it's human condition to not want change, right? We're not designed for change as people, right? How many times do you go to someplace and sit in the same chair even though it's not your assigned seat? We're creatures of habit. It's difficult for us to break habit when times are so uncertain.
Great, thank you. So what I'm hearing to thrive is we all need to be agile and also look out to the future to ensure that we are prepared for whatever that might bring. So please join me in thanking Aaron and Anne for an absolutely fascinating discussion.